The morning of my graduation, my mother was ironing my father's shirt. And not mine. And his. And she was pressing the collar with the kind of focus she never once gave to my report cards, my science projects, my late nights at the kitchen table with textbooks spread out like a map of somewhere she had never planned to visit. The iron moved back and forth in slow, steady strokes, and I stood in the doorway of the laundry room in my cap and gown holding my invitation card and waiting for her to look up. And she did not look up. And Mama, I said, we need to leave in 40 minutes. And she nodded the way people nod when they are not really listening. The way she had nodded for 4 years every time I called home to tell her about a professor who believed in me or a project that won a departmental prize or the internship I got junior year with a firm in the city that had glass walls and people who wore blazers and talked about systems and data like it was the most alive thing in the world. And she always nodded. And she never asked a follow-up question. And my father came into the room, and she handed him the shirt. He put it on without looking at me either. He was a man of few words on good days, and this was not a good day for him, because the factory where he had worked for 22 years had cut his hours again, and he was somewhere between exhausted and ashamed, and I had learned a long time ago not to place my joy in front of a man carrying that kind of weight. But today I needed something. And Baba, I said, I graduated with honors. And he looked at me, really looked. And then he said the thing that I would spend the next 3 years of my life trying to unhear. And honors in what, he said? In something that does not feed anyone. And my degree was in data science. And he did not know what that meant. And my mother set the iron down and smoothed the front of her dress. We will come, she said quietly. But Nadia, your father and I have talked. After today, you should think about something real. Nursing. Teaching. Something people can see. And something people can see. And I was 22 years old standing in my graduation gown that I had rented because I could not afford to buy it, and I had a 3.9 GPA and a letter of recommendation from a professor who had told me I had the sharpest analytical mind she had seen in a decade, and my mother was telling me that none of it was real enough to see. And I did not cry. And I had learned not to cry in front of them because crying looked like weakness, and weakness in our house was treated like a problem to be corrected, not a feeling to be held. And I went back to my room, and I sat on the edge of my bed, and I looked at the wall where I taped a printout of something my professor had written to me in an email 2 years earlier. It said, Nadia, you see patterns where other people see noise. That is a rare thing. Do not let anyone convince you that it is not valuable. And I read it 3 times. And then I stood up and I walked back out into the hallway, and I said, let's go. And the ceremony was held in the big arena on the east side of campus. There were thousands of people there. Families with balloons and cameras and little kids who kept dropping their programs on the floor. The air smelled like perfume and summer, and something electric like the whole room was charged with the feeling of something beginning. And my parents sat in the middle section. My mother held her purse on her lap with both hands. My father looked at his phone twice in the first 10 minutes and then put it away because there was no signal. And when they called my name, I walked across the stage, and I shook the dean's hand, and I looked out at the crowd, and I found my parents in the middle section, and I watched my mother lift her hand in a small wave. Not a proud wave. A polite one. Like she was acknowledging a neighbor across a parking lot. And my father did not wave at all. But I smiled anyway. And I smiled because I was not walking across that stage for them. And I was walking across it for the girl who had sat in the back of every classroom since she was 6 years old wondering if she was smart enough. For the girl who had gotten a full scholarship and cried alone in a dormitory bathroom because she had no one to tell. For the girl who had eaten rice and canned beans for 2 semesters to save money for a data analysis course that was not required, but that she had known in her bones she needed. And I walked across that stage for her. And the dinner after was at a restaurant my parents chose because it was close to the highway and they wanted to beat traffic on the way home. And we sat in a booth. My mother ordered soup. My father ordered the fish. I ordered water and a salad because I was not hungry in the way that has nothing to do with food. And for a while nobody spoke. And then my father put his fork down and said, so what now? And I have applications out, I said. 3 companies are already in review stages. I have a second round interview next Thursday. And with who, he said. And a tech company, I said. They work in predictive analytics. supply chain optimization. And he looked at my mother. And she stirred her soup. And Nadia, he said slowly, this is not stable. These tech companies, they close. They disappear. Your cousin Rania, she works at the hospital now. 2 years and she already has benefits. A pension. And I know about Rania, I said. And she helped her mother buy a car, my mother added softly. Not unkindly. Just like a fact she wanted me to have. And I looked at my hands on the table. And I understand what you want from me, I said. But I am asking you to trust that I know what I am doing. And my father picked his fork back up. And we trust you, he said. We just do not trust the thing you are doing. And I did not know how to answer that. And so I did not. And we drove home mostly in silence, and when they dropped me at my apartment, my mother hugged me at the curb and held me a second longer than usual, and I felt in that extra second something she did not know how to say out loud. Something like love that had not yet learned the shape of my life. And I went inside. And I sat on the floor of my apartment. And I let myself cry then. And not because they had hurt me. But because being unseen by the people who are supposed to see you most is a specific kind of loneliness that has no clean name for it. And the interview on Thursday was with a company called Viridian Systems. And I had researched them for 11 days. And not casually, obsessively. I had read their last 4 annual reports. I had studied their public data models. I had tracked the 3 acquisitions they had made in the past 2 years and built my own analysis of what those acquisitions suggested about their 5-year trajectory. I had printed color-coded notes and organized them in a folder, and then I had practiced answering questions in front of my bathroom mirror until the girl staring back at me looked like someone who belonged in that room. And the interview was video call first. 3 rounds. And the first was with a recruiter named Jasmine who was warm and fast and asked me questions about my background with the kind of genuine curiosity that made me sit up straighter without thinking about it. And the second was with a data team lead named Marcus who asked me to walk through a case study live. He gave me a dataset and 15 minutes and asked me to tell him something interesting about it. And I found 4 things. And he asked me to pick the most important one. And I told him which one, and I told him exactly why. And I could see something shift in his face. Not shock. Recognition. Like I had said a word in a language he thought very few people spoke. And the third round was with a woman named Dr. Elena Vasquez, who was the VP of Data Intelligence and who had a PhD from MIT, and who looked at me through the camera with eyes that were quiet and precise like 2 instruments measuring something. And she asked me one question. And tell me about a time when you saw something everyone else missed. And I did not tell her about a work project. And I told her about my father's factory. And I told her how I had gone to visit him once during my sophomore year and walked through the floor and looked at the production line. And within 20 minutes, I had seen 3 inefficiencies that were costing them hours per week. And I had gone home and built a model and written it up in a report that I gave to my father, who had looked at it like I had handed him something from another planet and who had never shown it to anyone. And I told her I had kept a copy. And she was quiet for a moment. And then she said, do you have that model still? And yes, I said. And can you send it to me? And I sent it that night. And the call came on a Tuesday. And 11:17 in the morning. I was at my kitchen table eating toast and working on a freelance project that paid almost nothing, but kept my mind moving. My phone lit up with a number I did not recognize, and I almost did not answer it. And I answered it. And it was Jasmine. And Nadia, she said. I am so pleased to be making this call. Dr. Vasquez wanted me to reach out personally. We would like to offer you a position on the data intelligence team. And she said the salary. And I set my toast down. And I had not misheard her. And I knew I had not misheard her because I had looked up industry ranges and even at the top end I had not expected this number. This was not an entry-level number. This was not a starting out number. This was a number that said we see what you are worth, and we are not going to make you negotiate for it. And we would also like to offer a relocation package, she continued, and a signing bonus. You would be working directly under Dr. Vasquez on a new initiative she is leading. And I said thank you. And I said I would review the offer and respond within the time frame. And I hung up. And then I sat very still in my kitchen for a long time. And Viridian Systems. and $10 billion valuation. Publicly listed. Known in the industry as one of the most innovative data companies in the country. Clients that included governments and hospital networks and logistics companies that moved goods across 6 continents. And they had called me first, and not a runner-up, and first. And Dr. Vasquez had specifically requested me. Jasmine had said those words. Specifically requested. And I thought about that factory model I had built when I was 19 years old in a dorm room eating instant noodles and wondering if I was just making things up that were not there. And I was not making them up. And I called my mother, and she answered on the 3rd ring. I could hear the television in the background. Some afternoon program she watched while folding laundry. And Nadia, is everything okay? And everything is fine, Mama, I said. I got the job, and silence. And the tech one, she said carefully. And yes, the one I told you about. Viridian Systems. Mama, they are one of the biggest data companies in the country. $10 billion company. And more silence. And then she said, and they want you. And they call me first, I said. They chose me out of everyone they interviewed. And I heard the television volume go down. And, what does it pay? She asked quietly. And I told her. And she did not say anything for a long moment, and in that silence I heard something I had not heard from her in a long time. I heard the particular quality of a person revising something they had believed to be solid. And that is good money, she said finally. And yes, Mama. And Nadia. Her voice had changed. Softer now. Slower. Your father and I. We were afraid. We did not understand and we were afraid. And I know, and fear says ugly things sometimes, and I know that too. And I heard her exhale. And will you come this Sunday, she said. I will make the lamb. Your Baba will want to hear about this. And I said yes. And I said I would come Sunday. And I moved to the city 6 weeks later. And my apartment was small and had a window that faced a brick wall, and I loved it completely and without reservation. I bought a plant. I bought a second-hand desk that was too big for the space and that I had to angle sideways to fit through the door. I bought good coffee, and I made it every morning standing in the kitchen in the early light before the city woke up, and I would stand there and drink it and feel the quiet, specific joy of a life that was mine. And the work was hard. And it was the best kind of hard. The kind that asks everything of you and then shows you that you had more than you thought. Dr. Vasquez ran her team like a conservatory. Rigorous and exacting and deeply invested in what each person could do at their highest level. She did not waste her time with noise. She did not fill meetings with words that meant nothing. She gave you a problem, and she trusted you to go find the shape of it. And in my first month, I rebuilt a forecasting model that had been giving the team inconsistent outputs for 2 quarters. I found the error in the 3rd week. It was not a coding error. It was a fundamental assumption error. Someone had built the model on a premise that had been true in a previous market environment and was no longer true, and no one had gone back to question the premise because the model was 3 years old and had a reputation, and questioning things with reputations requires a specific kind of courage. And I questioned it. And I brought my findings to Dr. Vasquez in a document I had spent 4 days on. She read it in my presence at her desk without speaking. When she finished, she looked up at me and said, "How long did it take you to find this?" And 3 weeks, I said. And our last 2 analysts spent 6 months on this model and found nothing. And they were looking at the code, I said. I looked at the assumption underneath the code. And she nodded slowly. And then she said, "I want you to present this to the full team on Thursday." And, "All right," I said. And Nadia. She paused. "This is exactly the kind of work I brought you here to do. Do not get careful on me." And I told her I would not. And Sunday dinners at my parents' house became a different thing after that. And not immediately. Not in one clean moment. But slowly, the way tides move things without announcing themselves. And my father started asking me questions about my work. Real questions. Specific ones. He asked how the models worked. He asked what made a good data set and what made a bad one. He was a man who had spent his whole life working with his hands, and he understood the logic of systems even if the language was new, and I watched him translating it into something he could hold. And one evening he said, "That thing you showed me, from when you were in university, that report about my factory floor. And I looked up from my plate. And I showed it to the floor manager last month, he said. And I set my fork down. And they're going to implement 2 of the changes, he said, starting next quarter. And my mother looked at him. And he looked at his plate. And Baba, I said quietly. And you were right, he said. And for him those 3 words were a mountain moved. You were right. And I did not know how to see it then. I know how to see it now. And the table was quiet. And outside the window the evening was doing that thing it does in late summer where the light goes gold and slow, and everything it touches looks like something worth keeping. And my mother reached across and put her hand over mine. And she did not say anything. And she did not need to. And a year into the role, Dr. Vasquez called me into her office and offered me a promotion. And senior data intelligence analyst. A team of my own. A budget. A mandate to lead a new initiative focused on real-world impact applications of predictive modeling in underserved community infrastructure and health systems, transit, water. The kind of places where good data could mean a child getting medical care 20 minutes faster or a neighborhood not flooding because someone finally mapped the drainage patterns correctly. And the kind of work that mattered in ways you could see. And I thought about my mother saying something real, something people can see. And here it was, and real and visible, and made exactly from what they had called pointless. And I said yes. And I sat with my team in our first meeting the following Monday, for people, sharp, curious people who had chosen this work for the same reason I had, because they could see patterns in the noise, and they wanted to do something with that seeing that was larger than a quarterly report. And I looked around that table. And I thought about the girl in the graduation gown holding her invitation card in a laundry room doorway waiting for someone to look up. And I thought about what I would say to her now. And I would say, they will look up. And not right away. Not in the way you are hoping for, or in the moment you need it most. But they will look up. And in the meantime you keep walking. You walk across the stage and you take the degree and you build the model and you question the assumption and you answer the call. And you answer the call. And because no one who ever mattered was waiting for permission. And my mother came to visit me in the city 3 months after the promotion. And she had never been to the city on her own before. She had always come with my father who drove and navigated and handled the logistics of unfamiliar places. But he had a doctor's appointment that week and she came alone on the train with her good handbag and her careful shoes, and when I met her at the station, she was standing very straight with her chin up the way women hold themselves when they want the world to know they are not afraid of it even when they are a little afraid of it. And I took her to my office first. And I had not planned to. We were supposed to go to lunch. But we were walking past the building and she slowed down in front of it and looked up at the glass and steel of it and said, "This is where you work." And yes, I said. And can we go in? And we went in. And I showed her the lobby, the open floor plan, the big windows with the view of the water. I showed her the room where my team worked, the whiteboards covered in notation, the screens with their lines of data doing the thing that data does when it is alive, which is move and breathe and mean something. And she stood in the middle of it and turned slowly. "And Nadia," she said. "And yes, Mama. And I owe you an apology. And Mama, you do not have to. And no." She turned to look at me. Her eyes were bright. Not crying. Just very awake. "I owe you one, and I want to give it to you properly so that it lands where it is supposed to land." And I waited. And I spent so many years being afraid of the things I did not understand, she said. And I let that fear talk when it should have been quiet. You were building something real and good and true, and I looked at it and called it pointless because I did not know the language it was written in. And she straightened her good handbag on her arm. "And that was my failure," she said. "Not yours." And I crossed the room and I held her. And she held me back. And we stood there in the middle of the room where I had learned that I was exactly who I had always hoped I was, and my mother held me the way she had not held me since I was small, and there was nothing complicated between us in that moment. And just the two of us. And just the apology landing exactly where it was supposed to. And that evening we had dinner at a place by the water. We talked for 3 hours. She told me stories about her own girlhood that I had never heard. About a teacher she had loved who had told her she was good at mathematics. About how there had been no path for that in the town where she grew up. about how she had married young because that was the path there was, and she had made the best life she knew how to make from the materials she was given. And she was not making excuses. And she was giving me context. And there is a difference. And when we walked back to my apartment through the evening city, she put her hand in the crook of my arm the way she used to when I was a child, and we walked like that through the streets, and she looked at everything with those careful, awake eyes of hers. And you build a good life, she said at some point. And I am still building it, I said. And she smiled. And that is the right answer, she said. And I think about patterns a lot. And it is my work after all. Finding the shape underneath the noise. Seeing what is really happening when the surface of a thing is telling a different story. And when I look at my own life that way, when I stand back and let the data speak, I can see it clearly now. And every closed door was redirecting me toward an open one. And every person who did not believe in me before they understood what I was doing was teaching me to believe in myself, without their permission. And every dinner that went quiet, every nod that was not really a nod, every voice that called my work pointless, all of it was just noise. And underneath the noise the pattern was always there, steady and persistent, and mine. And a woman who saw things, and who refused to stop seeing them. And who walked across stages and built models and questioned assumptions and answered calls and waited with a patience she taught herself for the people she loved to find the language for what she had always already known. And the $10 billion company called me first. But I had already called myself. And long before anyone else did. And long before the glass office and the team and the promotion and the apology in the right room at the right time. And on a dorm room floor. And in a graduation gown, and in the back of a classroom where no one was watching. And I had already called myself. And I had picked up. And every single time,